Bill Self continuing to work in the shadows. A surprise visitor for Kansas this weekend. Xaivian Lee, a transfer from Princeton. We deep dive into this transfer portal target for Kansas.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. And thank you for tuning in, whether you get us on our YouTube page or anywhere that you get your audio side of things on the podcast end. On today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're going to be doing a transfer portal deep dive on a KU portal target. That would be Xaivian Lee, a point guard from Princeton. We'll get into his scouting report, what his fit would possibly be with KU, as well as some of the latest news around the transfer portal for Kansas. Before we get into any of that, today's episode of the show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, let's get things started here with information on Xaivian Lee and a little bit on his scouting report. So Lee, who was somebody who just visited Kansas over this past weekend. It was kind of out of the blue. It was seemed like Florida versus St. John's race. I think he has more visits to come, but it just kind of came out of the blue that, he's at Kansas, which is certainly interesting too, because it sounds like they're going to be having visits from, or a visit from Melvin Council, and it's like, which of the guards do you pick? Well, let's get into that a little bit later. First, the rub on Lee. He is a combo guard, I guess I would call him. He was a point guard for Princeton. I call him a combo guard for the sake of, if he comes to Kansas, you're going to basically be a combo guard because you and Darryn Peterson are both going to be, at different points of time, the guy who can run the offense here or there. But he is 6'4", 180 pounds. So obviously, good height there. He'll be a senior this next season, played 3 seasons at Princeton. He averaged almost 17 points per game this year, a little over 6 rebounds per game, 5.5 assists, so really good raw numbers there. 1.2 steals per game, 0.4 blocks per game, which is good for a point guard. So obviously able to use that 6'4" frame. He shot 44% from the field. He shot almost 37% from three-point range on over 5 attempts per game. So solid numbers there. 79% at the foul line, just under 4 attempts per game there. And then his effective field goal percentage and true shooting percentage, closer to the average range. The team was about 5.5 points better offensively when he was on the floor. They were about 3 points worse with him defensively when he was on the floor. And Bart Torvik really likes him. They gave him a transfer portal grade of a 4.0 here. He has another year, last year as a sophomore, where he put up very similar numbers, in some areas better, in other ways worse. But this is back-to-back really good years of production for Xaivian Lee, and enough so that he entered into the draft process to test last year. So we have actually some measurements on Xaivian Lee to kind of know, what he's bringing to the table. And last year at the NBA Draft Combine, he measured 6'2" 3/4 barefoot. Now, again, the 6'4" listing is him playing in shoes, because you do play basketball in shoes. So the 6'4", I do believe, when you say he's 6'2" 3/4 without shoes, probably 6'4" with shoes. So that does add up. 8'3" standing reach, only 165 pounds. So he either put on weight or that number is being fibbed a little bit. Only a 6'4" 1/4 wingspan, so he's not the lengthiest guy. 36.5-inch max vertical. So that's a solid number for him. That was at the G League Combine. So he comes back this year, puts up a strong season, and really finished the season strong. So he only scored 2 points in a loss to Yale on one of 9 on the last day of January. Then he had 16 points, 11 and 11. But then from February 15th on, he goes 19-6. He goes 25, 6 and 6. Then 24, 8 and 3. 21, 9 and 5. This is points, rebounds, and assists, by the way. 14, 3 and 5. Then he has a triple-double, 23, 10 and 12. And then in the conference tournament, he has 14, 7, 6 with 2 steals, plays all 40 minutes against Yale in what ends up being a 2-point loss. So he finished the season very strong for Princeton. That's not the be-all, end-all, but it's always better to see that way, because then you can at least maybe in your head go, okay, maybe he's getting even better, right? His collegiate career gets closer to coming to a close. How did he do against upper-tier competition? Well, he's played 21 career games against KenPom top 100 opponents. And in those 21 games, he has shot only 42% from three. That's not a very good number there. 37% from 3-point range. So not you've seen the struggles from two against better competition. That is a little bit of a concern there. When you look at this season, though, they only played 6 games against KenPom top 100 opponents. 35% from three, only 40% on 2-point shots. For his career, he's 50% on twos, but against the better teams, those numbers go severely down. So that is a little bit of a worry here as we get into his strengths and weaknesses. Real quick before those, I do want to mention that his comp on CBB Analytics, like, it's actually a very interesting one because it's not just his best comp for a Big 12 player. It's his best comp for any player. It happens to be a Big 12 player, although I guess now a free agent. And this one kind of blew my mind in a weird way. It's Darryn Williams, the transfer from Texas Tech, who I dubbed as the number one available portal target for KU when I did that episode last week. And I'm very high on it. I think we might do a deep dive later this week. But that is his number one comp there. So I don't know what that says. I don't know if that says more about Lee or says more about Williams. I don't know. I just found that very interesting. But like, I want KU to go after Darryn Williams, so I guess that's a good thing that that's the case. And obviously Williams, had that statistic profile versus Big 12 teams, and Lee did it against Ivy League teams. So, one is different than the other, but I did find that interesting. I almost comp him a little bit in terms of, I almost say like Zeke Mayo with less shooting and more passing. And that almost sounds stupid because what is the best skill of Zeke Mayo? It is shooting. So if you're saying he is like this other player and his best skill is unlike that thing, then maybe it's not very like him. But just in terms of being a bigger guard who's maybe not the best athlete in the world, but and you maybe have some questions about the defense and the strength, how are those things going to hold up? But he's just a good kind of heady basketball player that I think can add things to the team. That's where I think it's interesting there. So the strengths for Xaivian Lee, well, the passing. On the season, he had a 99th percentile assist percentage. He also had a 95th percentile assist to turnover rate. And when you watch some of the clips, he does an excellent job at like throwing. It's anticipatory passes, I guess. Like he throws to where guys are going to be as opposed to where they are. And I think you see this a lot on lobs. He's an excellent lob thrower because he throws them at times where it's like he's expecting the guy to be in a certain spot and it doesn't look like they're going to be there, and then they do and they throw it down. And so like I think about Flory Bidunga as being a perfect recipient of that, and I go, okay, I can see some of the fit there. I found this excerpt from The Athletic. CJ Moore, Sam Vecini do a great job kind of updating transfer portal rankings and having some of the top players available. They have them ranked just outside the top 30, which among the guys who are actually uncommitted, I think it was like third or fourth among the best players, third, fourth, fifth, somewhere in that range. But I found this excerpt. Go read it there if you want to read the full scouting report. But I found this interesting. And speaking about the passing, it says, there might not be a better offhand passer in the country. He can throw lasers with his left hand. And I think you see that too, that he's not, he almost looks a little ambidextrous at times, like his ability to finish with his left hand too. And I think that's a good thing for him, especially when you look at, if you go up in level to the Big 12, it's going to be longer teams, it's going to be more athletic teams. Are you going to have a good finishing package to be able to overcome that? So that's important. Also, he can score off the bounce, 76th percentile in off the dribble scoring, 74th percentile as a ball screen handler, and then 74th percentile in isolation. So like you've watched Kansas the last few years, and one of the qualms that maybe you've had is they need more guys who can be able to get their own shot. And Xaivian Lee has been able to do that. Now, again, how does that translate up from the Ivy League to the Big 12 is a question, but he's at least shown his ability to do that. And Zeke Mayo was able to, maybe not translate it as efficiently as he did at South Dakota State, but he still was able to translate it to some degree, especially in the home games when he went to Kansas. So I think that gives you hope with Xaivian Lee there. He does have a good size for a point guard, like you mentioned, probably 6'4" in shoes. And I think it's safe to imagine, based on both the level of play, when you look at the assist percentage, you look at the lack of turnovers, you look at the assist to turnover percentage, you look at the fact that this dude is at Princeton, a very smart school in the Ivy League. I think it's probably safe to assume he is a smart basketball player. And I think when you see some of the passes and the anticipatory passes that he has there, and you see this guy who he doesn't like foul a ton. He's 70th percentile in like foul efficiency. he is a smart basketball player, and he's not one that is like taking dumb shots. Like he's taking good shots that he knows he can make or that, are in rhythm with the offense. So I think that those are all good things. Now, as far as the questions, the athleticism is the big one here. He was below average in transition because of it. I think you also look at how does that athleticism or lack thereof or foot quickness, how does that affect him on the defensive end of the floor? How does that affect him in terms of physicality? How does that affect him finishing at the rim, 2-point shots? And you overall look at his 2-point numbers on the season, and this is a guy who is just in the 30th percentile for at the rim shooting this year. And so he hasn't been the best at the rim shooting. And we just went over the 2-point numbers that have been dropping when he's playing against top 100 opponents this season. So that is the biggest worry for me. But maybe because if you have Flory, Bidunga and you have Darryn Peterson, like maybe his bigger role on the offensive end. Because I don't think people realize this with, let's get into this on the fit, because I do think there's an interesting thing with Devontae Graham and Frank Mason, where these are two guys who are basically point guards who are playing with each other, next to each other. And with Xaivian Lee, that would be kind of the idea with Darryn Peterson. And I do think there is at least one interesting comp with Lee and Devontae Graham. So we'll get to that in a moment. Here's not a comp, though. Just 26th percentile in catch and shoot. That's not great. I will say, to Lee's credit, he was 64th percentile in spot up, though. So he was better when he attacked the closeouts to drive. But what is his true level of shot making overall and shooting overall? He shot well from three, 70th percentile above the break, 98th percentile, but it's 0.1 attempt per game in corner threes on the season, 78th percentile in mid-range shooting. I think he's a good shooter, but the year before he was like 33, 34%. Is he an average shooter? Is he a good shooter? Is he a great shooter? Took a lot of volume at Princeton? I don't know. And how can he play next to Darryn Peterson? I have thoughts on that in a moment. Let's get to his player fit. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you just stop managing your money and you start building wealth. They have their all-in-one convenience where instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even use or plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. I continue on Locked On Jayhawks. How exactly would Xaivian Lee fit in with Kansas? So I mentioned some of the struggles, at the rim for Xaivian Lee and how, his numbers against better opponents went down pretty considerably on 2-point shots. Maybe if you bring him into Kansas, you make him more of because he's a good passer. So in certain ways, he would be on the ball, and his ability to score in isolation and score in the mid-range and stuff and score off step-back threes, that could still be used on the ball. But maybe he becomes more of a 3-point shooter than a rim threat. And because you have Darryn Peterson, who's able to really score at all levels, Flory, Bidunga, who's a rim threat as a dunk guy and out of lobs, that would work well with this kid, with Xaivian Lee. And because you have Trey White, who's going to be this slashing wing who should be able to get to the rim, maybe it's okay, especially when we've talked about a lot, like what is one of the bigger questions of this team? Do they have enough 3-point shooting? If you make his role more of a 3-point shooter, right? And so I go back to like Devontae Graham, because it's funny. You have all these times where it's like, oh man, I wish they had multiple ball handlers, multiple guys who could go get their bucket. And you see it in so many great Bill Self teams, Mario and Sharon and Russell Robinson to, I don't know. I guess the newest age iteration was, I guess Devon Dotson and Marcus Garrett, but before that, Devontae and Frank, right? Like, and there's many other in between all of those. And that was never a problem, but now it's like, sometimes you'll see the occasional comment where it's like, oh, but if they bring on this guy, is that going to be able to work with Darryn Peterson? It's like, it's worked all those other years. Why would it not work with Darryn Peterson? And so, that would not give me any worry with Xaivian Lee. And I think it'd be good, right? Because there is going to still be time Darryn Peterson goes to the bench. There is going to still be time Darryn Peterson is tired because he's been running around on the court, and it'd be good to give him a possession when he is on the court that he doesn't have to do literally everything for you, right? You need other guys to be able to do that. Now, with Devontae Graham, where I keep going back to this with Frank Mason, you have Frank Mason, National Player of the Year. You have Devontae Graham next to him. And Devontae, ends up being an All-American his final year. But the final year he played with Frank Mason, he still had a really solid season, over 13 points, over 4 rebounds, shot 39% from three. I wonder if that's the role that he would play, where it's like, okay, Devontae's still getting 4 assists per game, but he's not handling it as much as Frank, but he's still handling it a good amount. And so you look back to Devontae Graham, and I don't think Xaivian Lee is as quick as Devontae Graham. I don't think he's as good of a three-point shooter. So I'm not saying this as a comp necessarily, but I am bringing it up from the 2-point percentage. Devontae Graham, his final year at Kansas, I don't think people realize this because Devontae was still a first-team All-American. He had a great season. Devontae was awesome at KU. Devontae Graham only shot 39% on twos his senior season at Kansas. I don't know that many people realize that. Only 39% on 2-point shots. His junior year, when he played with Frank, the 2-point shots were about cut in half in terms of the volume, but he shot 50% on those 2-point shots. So I basically bring that up because, Devontae was shooting more, like as a senior, you're the guy, you're having to take more contested twos. Whereas when he's with Frank, the twos he ends up taking are probably more of, okay, I got an open layup or I got a better one-on-one to my liking. And with Xaivian Lee, you're playing at Princeton, you're the primary option. Okay, now it's a little different playing with Darryn Peterson where maybe you don't have to take as many twos, right? Devontae was still a good enough player. So I like the fit for Xaivian Lee. I think it'd be a great lob threat with Flory Bidunga. He's a good passer, so you don't have to worry about, is this guy going to, is the ball going to stick in his hands and not get to the hands of Darryn Peterson? I don't think you have to worry about that. And I keep going back to this. Smart basketball players figure it out. And so Xaivian Lee, who I went over that earlier, I think it's probably safe to say he's a smart basketball player. I think he would probably figure out what his role would need to be, right? Sometimes you bring on guys, right, who, is it going to work? It might work if this or that happens. If Bill Self can get him to do this, if Bill Self can get him to be better at X, then it'll be a fit. Well, how often does that work? We just saw that with AJ Storr, Rylan Griffin. If Rylan Griffin can figure out how to defend, if AJ Storr can figure out how to play defense, didn't work out well, right? But with Xaivian Lee, you have a kid here who it's like, oh, he was at Princeton, like he's trying to work to the next level. He's trying to figure out how to be a better role player because that will be his role at the NBA. I think he'll figure it out, right? And there are some of those things that make you feel good about it. And yes, some of the fit questions I would have would be, what would his athleticism be? How would it translate up? How would he be attacked on the defensive end of the floor? But the idea that you have some good defenders around him, Flory Bidunga blocking shots, Trey White, Darryn Peterson just doing everything around you. The fact that you have those guys for insulation, I think helps there. And the fact that you just had a season where Zeke Mayo was one of your best players, and I think there, like I said, are some comps there, I think helps knowing what the fit could be. And so you look at the defensive end of the floor, you can work this a lot of ways too because of Darryn Peterson, right? Peterson gives you the ability. He's 6'5" with a 6'10" wingspan. If you want to put Peterson on the opposing point guard, you can probably do that. If you want to put Peterson on the opposing small forward, like their wing, you can do that too. And so you can almost mix and match. Okay, Xaivian Lee in this matchup, their point guard isn't the fastest guy in the world. We'll be fine putting you on him. Versus this team, they've got a quick point guard. Maybe we'll put Jaden Dawson on him in this matchup, or Marco Jackson on him in this matchup. And then we're going to put you on the 2, or we're going to put you on the 3, or we're going to try to hide you on this guy who just shoots like spot up threes, So I think you can make it work. I do think it comes down to kind of a one-on-one. I don't know that you want Xaivian Lee and Melvin Council, right? If you're making me choose. So the quick comparison there would be Council gives you more athleticism. Council gives you more defense. Lee gives you more. And Council was still a good passer and avoided turnovers too, but I think Lee is like another notch for the passing, just a little bit there. Lee gives you better 3-point shooting. Lee gives you more offense overall. Council better in transition. Lee not as much. So who do you go with there? I think it's a very interesting question for Bill Self and staff, if both of them are interested. And obviously it doesn't always work this way. We saw it with Nick Timberlake, North Carolina, UConn wanted him, and that didn't work out as well for KU. But even though it doesn't always work out in one situation, I think over time, typically, if like the fact that the other schools that seem to be in on him are St. John's with Rick Pitino and Florida, who just won a national championship and has like nailed the transfer portal. Again, it doesn't always work out. There is the Nick Timberlake situation. But if I'm giving you 10 situations where you have 10 different players whose all the schools they're choosing from are Kansas and other good schools who operate in the portal well, yeah, you're going to end up with some of those situations that are Timberlake. You're going to end up with a lot of others of those situations that end up pretty good. So I do think that speaks well to Xaivian Lee's game. All right, what's some of the other latest news for KU basketball, the transfer portal, and a little KU football news too, maybe on the offensive line? Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free TradeMaster program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the TradeMaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com, promo code SH5. Thanks for joining us on the show today. Don't forget to check out Locked On College Football or Locked On College Basketball for your second listen every day. All right, some of the latest news. I've mentioned this on a previous episode, and it just continues to happen. So I guess expect Xaivian Lee to commit within the next 24, 48 hours. But I swear, every time we do one of these deep dives, it's the kid commits within 24 to 48 hours. I'm sure there's a couple that's not the case, but it keeps happening. It just happened with Watts, who we did a deep dive on, and he ends up going to Texas Tech. So he's gone out of the portal. Thought he would have been a fun fit for KU along the wing and given him a post-up opportunity. And said Kansas gonna have to play against him. And I do find that interesting for Tech because he becomes the Darryn Williams replacement. It's also interesting from the Big 12 perspective because Tech is going to be projected to be one of the best teams in the conference. JT Toppin returning, their young freshman guard, I think Chance Williams or whatever, coming back, is expected to have a really good season. So Texas Tech going to be one to beat in the Big 12 this year. Outside of that, Sean Phillips, who it seemed like a center from Arizona State, Kansas might have had a little bit of interest, might have had some conversation with to maybe come in and try to be the backup to Flory Bidunga. And he committed to Kansas' rival, which is Missouri. So Kansas will see him this year, just as I guess they will see with Watts. And I believe this year the Missouri game is at the T-Mobile Center. So that'll be a different, environment, different challenge for that. There also is some KU football news to get to here. It is Appalachian State Markel Samuel. He has visits set up now upcoming for Oklahoma State, UCF, and Kansas. And the agency or whatever that he is repped by is apparently the same agency as a couple recent, DJ Graham, the transfer in from Utah State, before that Oklahoma, of Kansas players. So I don't know if that helps KU here. I guess it just depends how those guys feel about things. He was all Sun Belt Conference honorable mention pick on the line. It sounds like some other schools are trying to line up visits as well. So we'll see what happens there. But this is a good reminder that the transfer portal is opening back up, I believe, for college football on the 16th, something like that. And it closes on the 25th. So the spring portal, KU going to have some opportunities to bring guys in. They probably needed more line depth to begin with. Is this scary at all? Does it tell you that they don't feel great about some of the stuff? Or is it just they needed more line depth all along and they weren't able to find one more, in the winter portal, and they figured we'll just wait till the spring. So that'll be something maybe we talk about a little bit more as that visit possibly gets closer, and maybe some more KU football portal news to be on the lookout for as well. This isn't just KU basketball portal time. It's now KU football portal time too, and we'll be talking all about it right here on Locked On Jayhawks. So make sure you subscribe to the show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. See you next time for more portal talk right here on LOJ.